There's a specific moment that almost everyone has experienced at some point. You're looking at an old photograph or listening to a song you haven't heard in years, and something happens inside you, a feeling that's hard to name. It's not exactly joy. It's not exactly sadness. It's something in between, like a dim light in a room you swore you remembered differently. And then you start revisiting that summer, that phase, that version of yourself that seemed lighter, and the more you look, the more real it seems, the more perfect it seems, as if the past were a better place than anywhere you can reach now. But there's something nobody tells you about this process, and it's not something you do on purpose. It's something that happens silently while you sleep, while you live, while you simply exist. The brain is always working behind the scenes, and it doesn't store the past as it was. It stores the past as you needed it to be. If any part of this feels familiar to you, you're not alone. And if you ever feel like sharing your experience, the comments are open. You don't remember the past, you remember the version your brain decided to keep. There's a difference between what happened and what you carry with you. That difference is silent, almost invisible, but it's there. The brain doesn't work like a camera that records everything with precision. It works more like an editor that decides what stays and what goes into the final cut. Think about the last time you told someone a story from your past. You weren't reciting a file. You were reconstructing, piecing together fragments, filling in gaps, organizing a narrative that made sense. And that narrative was no longer exactly what happened, it was what remained. What remains of a memory is never neutral. It's laden with how you felt at that moment, who you were, who you wanted to be. En deux victimes, these layers merge with the original memory until it's no longer possible to separate what was real from what was felt. The past you carry is your own creation, even if you never realized you were creating it. Memory doesn't record, it paints and always chooses the colors you want to see. Imagine that each memory you have is a canvas, not a photograph, a painting, and every painting has a painter even when you don't remember picking up the brush. The colors that remain are never neutral. They are chosen by something inside you that you rarely consult. When a memory is good, the brain tends to saturate the colors. The day seems sunnier than it was. People seem more present than they were. The feeling you carried at that moment becomes the dominant tone of everything around you. And what contradicts that tone gradually disappears without warning. It's not a lie, it's not weakness. It's the way the mind organizes what it has experienced. It doesn't store the event itself. It stores the meaning you gave it. And that meaning is painted and repainted each time you return to that memory, until what you see is no longer the past, it's the portrait you needed of it. Every longing carries a little lie that you agreed to believe. Nostalgia has a specific weight. It's not the weight of what was, it's the weight of what you imagine you've lost. And there's a huge difference between those two things, even if it's almost impossible to feel it internally, because nostalgia doesn't warn you when it starts working with edited material. There's always a slightly exaggerated version within every feeling of nostalgia. The relationship that ended seems more intense than it actually was. Childhood seems freer than you actually felt you experienced it. The past phase seems to have had something that the present hasn't yet delivered. And you agree with this version, not consciously, but you agree, because it's more comfortable than the complete version with all the pain that also came with it. This little lie isn't your mistake, it's a mechanism, but knowing it exists changes something in how you look at what you miss. Your brain erases what hurt and amplifies what's shown without warning you. There's a filter you never installed, but it's always active. It operates while you sleep, while you live, while you simply move forward. And its work is silent, smoothing the edges, diminishing the volume of pain, allowing what was beautiful to occupy more space than it actually did. You don't ask for it. It simply does it. Over time, what was complicated becomes simple in memory. What was painful becomes merely difficult. What was ambiguous becomes clear. And what, shown even if only for a moment, becomes the symbol of that entire phase. As if the brilliance of an instant could represent the weight of an entire period. This process protects something within you genuinely. Without it, revisiting the past would be heavier than the mind could bear. But it also creates a version of the past that never quite existed in this way. A gentler, cleaner version, and therefore sometimes harder to let go of. When you idealize a time frame, you're protecting something you haven't yet processed. There's a specific reason why you always return to the same period. It's not just nostalgia, it's something more subtle than that. It's as if that phase holds a question you haven't yet answered, and idealizing it is a way to stay close to the question without having to confront it. Idealization functions like a locked room within memory. You decorate the door, put on good lighting, make everything beautiful on the outside, but you don't open it, because opening it would mean seeing what's stored inside with more clarity than you're ready to see now. And so you stay outside, admiring the door and calling it longing. There is no judgment in this movement. It is human, profoundly human. The mind protects what has not yet been digested by covering it with a layer of nostalgia, as if the brilliance of the past were a natural anesthetic for something that the present still demands attention for. And sometimes recognizing this is already the beginning of something. The version of yourself you tell about your past has already been edited more than once. Think about how you would describe who you were: more naive, more free, more courageous, more lost. Whatever version it is, it has gone through many revisions before reaching its current form, and each revision carried the perspective of who you are now, not who you were then. You don't recount the past with the eyes of the past. You recount it with the eyes of the present, looking back. And the present always interprets. It always reorganizes itself. I've always found patterns that perhaps weren't so clearly there while you were living. The narrative you have of yourself is a work in constant rewriting. This doesn't make the story any less yours. It remains yours completely, but it means that the character you call past me has already been shaped by everything that came after, by the mistakes you later understood, by the choices you reinterpreted over time. You don't remember who you were, you remember who you decided you were. You don't miss what was, you miss what you imagined it was. There's a specific object within each feeling of nostalgia, and that object is rarely the actual event, the actual person, the actual time. It's a construct, an emotional synthesis of everything that phase represented for you. A compressed, refined, slightly unreal version, and that's why it's so difficult to find again. You don't want to go back to that small apartment. You want to go back to the feeling you had there. You don't miss that person exactly as they were. You miss what you felt when you were near them. You don't want that phase back with all its real problems. You want what it symbolized. And that symbol is something the brain created, not something that existed exactly like that. The longing for something that was never exactly as you remember it has a different weight. It can't be resolved by going back, because the place you want to visit doesn't exist on any map. There is only the way your memory has organized what you felt. And recognizing this doesn't dissolve the longing, but it slightly changes the perspective from which you look at it. The brain stores memories as they suit the present, not as they actually happened. There's a silent logic behind what you remember and what you forget. It's not random. It's not capricious. It follows a need that the present carries and that you often can't clearly name. The brain files away the past according to what you need to believe now. If you are experiencing doubt, memories of courage appear less frequently. If you are experiencing loss, memories of fulfillment gain volume and color. If you need to justify a choice you made, the past rearranges itself to support that justification. Everything happens behind the scenes without you needing to authorize anything. This means that the past you access today is not fixed. It responds to the present. It adapts to what you are experiencing now. And tomorrow, depending on where you are, it may appear in slightly different colors. Memory is not a file. It is a living organism that continues to grow along with you. Each time you revisit a memory, it changes a little and you don't even realize it. Something happens every time you open a memory. It doesn't appear intact. It appears and then is reconstructed in real time as you remember. And in that process of reconstruction, it absorbs a little of who you are now, a little of your mood, your tiredness, your hope on that specific day. Think of a memory you've revisited many times throughout your life. Does it still seem the same as when you first accessed it? Probably not. It has been shaped with each visit. Each time you remembered it, you also wrote about it without realizing you were doing so. It's like a photograph you handle frequently. Over time, the fingerprints become part of the image. You can no longer separate what was in the original photo from what was added by repeated touching. And the memory you call your own is always that version touched, revisited, transformed. Nostalgia is the most comfortable place to hide what the present hasn't yet resolved. The past has an advantage the present will never have. It's already over. It doesn't demand anything from you now. You can visit it, organize it, inhabit it for a moment and then leave without consequences. And that makes it a perfect refuge for those who carry something that the present is still asking for. When the present weighs too heavily, the mind finds a way back, not as a conscious escape, but as automatic relief, like opening an old window just to feel a familiar breeze. The idealized past offers familiarity at a time when the present seems too strange. But there is something worth noting in this movement. The frequency with which you return to a specific time can say something about what has not yet been resolved here, now, not as an accusation, not as a diagnosis, just as a silent observation, the kind the mind makes when it is ready to look more honestly at itself. Something happens when you reach the end of a reflection like this, a kind of silence different from what was there at the beginning. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know, but the silence of someone who has begun to recognize something that has always been there, quiet, present, waiting to be seen. The past you carry is not a lie. It is real in the way that things constructed by the human mind are real. It was shaped by who you were, by what you felt, by what you needed to protect at every moment of your life, and that makes it more human, no less true. Memory edits because the mind takes care of it. Nostalgia idealizes because something inside you is still working. The brain rewrites because it remains alive, continues trying to organize what you've lived through into something that makes sense. There's no flaw in that. There's only the silent workings of who you are. What changes, perhaps, is how you look at this process now, with a little less certainty about what it really was, with a little more curiosity about what the past you idealize is trying to tell you about the present, not as an answer, as an open question, the kind that doesn't need urgency to be answered. And if you've made it this far, it's because something along the way touched you in some way. No bichance, but because true recognition doesn't happen with what is distant. It happens with what was already inside, just waiting for the right moment to appear. If you want to continue exploring this type of reflection, this channel will be here.